You are watching France 24. It's time now for 60 Minutes Live around the world. I'm Jeannie Godula. The headlines. Italian Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte resigns, a gamble he's taking to try to put together a new coalition. Our chief foreign editor, Rob Parsons, standing by with more. The European Union threatening to slap tight export controls on COVID-19 vaccines to make up for what could be a shortfall in the AstraZeneca vaccine. The EU slamming the company for failing to guarantee delivery. And as French teachers and students take to the streets in protest today, we'll take a closer look at how college kids are dealing with the isolation of stay-at-home school. We'll also be touching base with our senior reporter Claire Paquelin at a protest in Paris. Also on the way this hour, Belgium's hidden hairdressers. As stylists from salons forced to close due to COVID-19 turn to illegal home visits to make ends meet. More on that coming up with Stephen Carroll. And the biggest French TV show of the moment is now a huge global hit on Netflix. It's called Lupin, and it's a Robin Hood meets James Bond meets Ocean's 11, all with a French twist. The details on the way. First, though, our top story, live from Paris. Italian Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte has resigned in hopes of trying to form a new coalition government. He wants to also tackle the coronavirus pandemic that's killed more than 85,000 people in Italy and crippled the economy. Conte already survived a confidence vote last week after a coalition partner pulled out. He has been left severely weakened, though, and his resignation is seen as an attempt to avert a humiliating defeat in the Senate later this week. Well, France 24's chief foreign editor, Rob Parsons, has been keeping a close eye on this story for us. He joins us now. Rob, Conte's just resigned. What happens next?
Yeah, it's a good question. There are a number of options that are open to Sergio Mattarella, the president. I mean, I suppose he could say, no, I'm not accepting your resignation, but that's highly unlikely. Most likely is he will say to Conte, go ahead, try and form another government. There are a couple of other possibilities, though. He may decide he should go for somebody else. That Conte has already had two coalition governments. He's not getting anywhere. He's not likely to get anywhere. So therefore, we should try and find somebody else, and perhaps, and this wouldn't be the first time in Italy, try to form a technocratic government with somebody from outside the political system. It's a possibility, but considered quite unlikely. A third possibility would be elections. But, you know, who wants elections in Italy at a time like this when, as you pointed out, 85,000 people have died already from the coronavirus, thousands more affected, the economy in a terrible state. It's not the moment for elections, particularly when the polls are showing that the far right, the League Party, is in front at the moment. So I think that the political establishment would be loath to go down that path at the moment. Most likely then is that Giuseppe Conte will be given another chance to form a government.
And in the meantime, he is staying on in a caretaker capacity. But let's say that he is given another chance. What are his chances for success?
Yeah, well, it's a pretty good question, because the coalition that he led before was a pretty narrow one in any case. And now that Matteo Renzi's Italia Viva party have dropped out of the coalition, which provoked this crisis in the first place, the question is Conte in a position to draw any of them back into a coalition? Where is he going to find the numbers from so that he gets a majority in parliament, however wafer thin? It's a tall order for him, particularly as Matteo Renzi has said he won't come back into the government unless Conte meets his demands on economic reform, how to use the money that is going to be coming from the European Union, 209 billion euros of money to recover the economy following the coronavirus and the recession. A big dispute about that. Renzi says no, unless you back down. Conte is not going to back down to Renzi, it's clear. So can he draw some members of Renzi's party into his coalition without Renzi? I guess that would be a possibility. And you're bearing in mind that Conte himself, despite the problems of the economy, remains relatively popular. His popularity rating still over 50%. So, you know, he will feel that he has public opinion on his side, but the options are not great.
Rob, thanks for that. France 24's Rob Parsons. Now, the rollout of the COVID-19 vaccine has been heavily delayed, not just in France, but across Europe. The European Union now coming up with new ways to reach its goal of vaccinating 70% of all adults by the fall. One new proposal would put restrictions on the number of vaccines leaving the bloc. Frustration also growing against vaccine maker AstraZeneca for its delay in deliveries.
The European Union has pre-financed the development of the vaccine and its production and wants to see the return. The European Union wants to know exactly which doses have been produced where by AstraZeneca so far, and if or to whom they have been delivered.
Our Brussels correspondent Dave Keating's been keeping a close eye on this story. He told us more about AstraZeneca.
In August, the EU gave AstraZeneca a whole bunch of money to help with their development of their vaccine. And in return, AstraZeneca was supposed to reserve 300 million doses for EU countries. The Commission says that it looks like that hasn't been done. We have imminent approval awaiting for the AstraZeneca vaccine by the EU Medicines Authority. We're expecting that in the next 3 days. But on Friday, AstraZeneca sent a letter to EU member states saying that they would not be able to meet what was promised in terms of the first weeks of the rollout of the vaccine. We're not exactly sure how much less the delivery is going to be, but some countries are saying they're expecting only 20% of what they were promised in terms of these first weeks. So the Commission is furious. I know AstraZeneca says this is because of a production problem in the European supply chain, but several EU lawmakers are asking, if that's the case, why is distribution to the UK not being affected? So there's been a back and forth between Commissioner Kyriakides, who you just heard there in the sound clip. She is really not happy with the explanation she's been given by AstraZeneca. She wants to know where those vaccine doses went. And this is coming at a horrible time for the EU because across the bloc, many countries have really struggled with the vaccine rollout. And also, they are facing companies with production bottlenecks. This comes just 2 weeks after Pfizer delivered the news that it also wouldn't be able to meet its commitments in the first weeks because it wants to upgrade its production facility here in Belgium. So all in all, it's looking like the pharma companies are not being able to supply the amount of vaccines they promised when these contracts were negotiated, and that is really spooking people here.
Brussels correspondent Dave Keating. Here in France, the number of new coronavirus infections rose again in the past 24 hours. French officials getting more and more concerned about the UK variant now of COVID-19. That mutation is thought to be both more contagious and more deadly than the original. Experts are saying it could become the dominant form of the virus by March if nothing is done to stop it. Erin Ogunkeye reports.
Nearly all positive COVID-19 test results in France are now sent to this laboratory in the Paris region.
On collecte des échantillons tous les jours de partout en France pour pouvoir réaliser l'analyse Covid ici.
The goal, to identify cases of the British variant of the coronavirus among all of the positive test samples.
Aujourd'hui, on est capable, avec cette technique, d'avoir précisément le variant dit UK, d'identifier la souche dite classique et également d'identifier un variant qui ne serait pas UK, qui serait soit en fait celui du variant dit sud-africain ou brésilien.
As of last weekend, this lab has analyzed some 5,000 coronavirus tests. While the final results are not yet ready, one thing is sure: the mutations are circulating in France, especially the British one. 8 cases were even identified at this retirement home in Toulouse, with 2 patients succumbing to the variant. And health experts in the greater Paris region suspect it's contributing to growing case numbers there. According to the BioGroup laboratory, which carries out 40% of coronavirus tests in the region, the British variant has spiked from 1% to 21% of positive COVID-19 tests over the past 3 weeks.
On voit que le nombre de positifs augmente, mais le nombre de suspicions de variants augmente beaucoup plus fortement, proportionnellement et par rapport au nombre de positifs.
Official statistics are set to be published by the middle of the week and will provide a clearer picture of the spread of the COVID-19 variants on French territory.
The COVID-19 crisis is taking a heavy toll on the mental health of students across the world, also here in France. University students are joining teachers on strike today to protest their conditions and ask for more support. A recent government report says 50% of France's young people are worried about their mental health, with 23% of students saying they've thought about killing themselves. Last week, the French President Emmanuel Macron said students would be allowed back on campus once a week in a bid to ease the psychological impact of those COVID restrictions. Well, both students and teachers are turning out at a rally that's on now in Paris at the Luxembourg Gardens. France 24 senior reporter Claire Paquelin is there as well. Claire, let's start first with the teachers and with school nurses who are striking today. They've turned out in force, as we say in French. What are they most angry about?
Well, school teachers as well as school nurses say that they are underpaid and understaffed, and that the COVID-19 crisis has really highlighted the difficulties that they've been trying to raise for the government for quite some time now. They say that when a teacher falls ill because they've contracted COVID-19 or when they need to take time off work because they've been in contact with someone who's positive, they're simply not replaced. School nurses, who you might be able to make out behind me, are dressed in survival blankets for today's rally. They say that they're in survival mode because that's how bad it's got. All of their time is taken up now with dealing with COVID-19 testing or tracing, and they simply don't have time to actually deal with any other problems that their pupils may be facing. They say that they're in survival mode and that they are asking the government here today in Paris to do something about it. Understaffed, underpaid. They're marching through the streets of Paris behind me right now, and they're heading to the Education Ministry.
Claire, what about students? Are there many students who've turned out today? And if so, what are their complaints?
Students have turned out today, mostly university students, and while their requests and complaints are not quite the same as the school teachers, they're here partly to show support, but also to say that the government's measures, which the president announced last week, the government says it's well aware that students are facing isolation, mental health issues, as well as financial difficulties. The government did bring in measures, 2 meals a day for €1, as well as the possibility for students to come back into class physically 1 day a week. Now, the students that I've been talking to say that's simply not enough. They say that they want to be in class more than that. They say that online learning is not effective and it's leading to some students not doing so well in their studies and feeling isolated at home. And they said, look, we are responsible. We can come into class in small groups and respect hygiene measures. They also say the government's measure to allow them to have 2 meals a day for €1 isn't practical for many students because those meals would be in university canteens. And of course, students are at home at the moment most of the time, and they might live 45 minutes or an hour away from their university, and they're not going to get on public transport, possibly expose themselves to the virus in order to get that cheap subsidized meal. So they're hoping that after last week's measures, the government today will then be encouraged to put in more measures in their favour.
Claire, thank you for that. France 24's Claire Paquelin there at that protest in Paris. Well, all of this week, we're focusing on the 10-year anniversary of the Egyptian Revolution with a series of special reports. A decade ago, the revolutionary slogan was bread, freedom, and social justice. Well, today, freedom in Egypt has been drastically curtailed after the military regained power 6 years ago. At least 60,000 political prisoners are now behind bars, often without trial or any legal assistance. This report from our team in Cairo.
Getting ready to move out. Hossam Bagat, the acting head of this human rights organisation, is making sure everything is in order.
Because we had to move before the end of January, and so
If the landlord has asked his tenants to leave, it's because last November, 3 members of their staff were imprisoned by the authorities for belonging to a terrorist group. Following an international outcry, they were released after just 3 weeks. A grotesque situation in which freedoms are threatened in the name of the fight against terrorism.
Well, terrorism became a meaningless word when Sisi was elected president in 2014. He changed the terrorism law and basically made everything terrorism. And the problem is the prosecution authorities, the judiciary, started supporting this, became part of this machine. No one is safe, and I think every Egyptian understands this now.
In September 2019, at least 4,000 people were arbitrarily detained. This young Egyptian was arrested whilst filming protests with his mobile phone and was jailed for 12 days.
كان معانا أب، كان معانا ولد صغير، فكان معانا عدد كبير من الناس. أنا كنت مرعوب. عمل دايرة والضابط كان واقف في النص وكان واقف عمال يتسلى بقى يعني فلان هيضربه فلان هيشتمه. قعد يهددنا ويقول لنا ان انتوا مش هتخرجوا تاني ابدا.
Today, Egypt has around 60,000 political prisoners, although, according to human rights groups, this figure is an underestimate.
Let's take a moment now to look at the biggest French TV show of the moment that's becoming a huge global hit on Netflix. It's called Lupin, and it's a modern-day take on the century-old fictional character Arsène Lupin. Now, this new remake is a sort of Robin Hood meets James Bond meets Ocean's 11, and our Yena Lee took a look.
You underestimated me. You didn't look at me. You saw me, but you didn't really look.
It's a timeless story about family and revenge set in contemporary Paris. Lupin is Netflix's latest hit and the first French production to debut in the US top 10 chart.
We grounded it in something very contemporary. We wanted to show Paris as it is, the monuments, but also the suburbs. It was important to show Paris in its entirety. We didn't want it to look like a postcard.
Omar Sy plays a thief who was inspired by fictional character Arsène Lupin, a charismatic conman and a master of disguise.
I think Lupin is the ideal character for an actor. You can do anything with him. You can be dramatic, lighthearted. He's charming, he's clever, there's action.
The enthusiasm for the series has revived interest in the original Lupin books. Author Maurice Leblanc first invented the character in 1905. Publisher Hachette says in 2 weeks they sold what they usually print in 1 year.
It's fascinating for us publishers to see all these readers who are passionate about a character who's almost 100 years old, since the first Arsène Lupin books were published a century ago.
Expect the unexpected in this modern twist on a French classic. Netflix France's latest production brings together action, sleek scenes and unrealistic getaways. Though the writing may be predictable, it's already a hit on the small screen. The streaming platform estimates that some 70 million people around the world will have watched Lupin in the first month of its release.
You know the handcuff trick?
The handcuff what?
Well, now you do.